welcome you on the stage to the Masterclass now. You can all put on your headphones, make yourself comfortable. And well, this is the last Masterclass of OMR 23 for you guys, I guess. So I'm happy that you are here. I'm Femke from OMR Education, and we are just so happy to be able to present to you this Masterclass from Luana Karasima and Rosaria Alfano from Crealytics, and they're going to talk to us about Performance Max and how we can use this predictive intelligence to, well, win over new customers because, well, I think that's quite a good objective for everyone. So we're going to have a good time, I guess. And yeah, let's give them a warm welcome and have fun.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? Do you still have a little bit of energy for the last masterclass of the day? I hope so. So, yeah, welcome. Today, Rosaria and myself are going to take you through a deep dive into Google most holistic and most automated format, PMax. And we are going to do it to approach it from a twofold angle. So we're going to give you some best practices, tips and tricks on how you can leverage this format to the best of your, for your business objectives. But we are also going to take it from a strategic angle and see how we can take Performance Max to the next level and make it possible to realign it with your business objectives. Before we start, very, very short about a few words about ourselves. I'm Luana Quaresima. I'm the Global Head of Digital Marketing at Crealytics. And with a team of plus 100 digital marketing experts, we service retail clients across the globe out of Berlin, New York, London, Chicago, and Mumbai. And today I have the pleasure to have here on stage with me my colleague Rosaria Alfano.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rosaria Alfano. I've been at Crealytics for 5 years. I'm a senior director of digital marketing, but I've been in the industry for over 8 years, starting from SEO, so a bit more on the content side, and then moved to SEA. I'm a bit more data-driven, let's say. And yeah, I'm very happy and excited to be here today. So I hope you'll enjoy this session with us. And yeah, also thanks for being here at the very last slot of this conference. So thanks a lot. And thanks, Luana.
Thank you. So we said we wanted to take you through a journey in PMax where we would like to take it from an operational perspective, but also from a strategic perspective. And we would like to start very shortly our introduction about that strategic perspective, taking a step back by thinking about PMax not only as a new format that we need to leverage for our accounts, but also as a format that you can think of in the wider scheme of this shift in paradigm that we are experiencing with AI. And to do so, we would like to take a very, very short moment to take a look at this quote from Google. Nicolas Davot-Garneau, chief evangelist at Google, said 3 years ago that all digital campaigns will be run by machine learning in 3 years' time. Well, we're almost there. And PMax is only one very, very good example of the fact that we are getting there. And so if we still take a look at this very, very important quote from Google, there is one aspect that I would like us to focus about, and that is that you need to optimize for the right metric. And if you're able to forecast lifetime value better than your competitors, then you'll have a competitive edge towards the rest of the market. And I would like us to really take this quote because it's going to be very, very important in our further presentation, and you'll see why. This shift in paradigm is not happening overnight. It hasn't been happening since 2021. It's been happening for at least over a decade. If we take a look at 2012 already, Facebook, well, Meta, launched already the first publisher-sided automated bidding. 2 years later, Google launched Google Shopping. And so with that, it took a first step away from the nitty-gritty keyword targeting and transitioned to a product feed-focused way of automizing campaigns. 2016, Google started testing smart bidding. And with that, it took a further step into changing the way that we are approaching our campaigns. And 2 years later, TROAS finally hit the market. And it was a big revolution in the way that we have started approaching our campaigns. For the first time, we could not anymore just attach a CPC to our keywords, to our audience modifiers and ad scheduling, etc. So we really took a step towards a black box, if we want to, a type of automation into bidding. And at the same time, Google launched Smart Shopping, which was a further automated iteration of shopping. Then this year, or actually 2021 first, Google launched Performance Max, and in 2022 the format started replacing or absorbing smart shopping. And with that, we arrived in a place where we as a digital marketers are now confronted with having to leverage a format that is able to access a lot of inventory, the entirety of the Google inventory, but it's far more automated than the type of campaigns that we're used to or were used to deal with. And that automation is not going to stop there, it's here to stay. We'll see much more and in a much more accelerated way in the upcoming time. Already this year, both Google and Facebook, Meta, announced that they will be using generative AI to automate creatives. And so you see, the more we come into the present and into the future, the more AI automation we'll have in the way that we leverage our campaigns. And so we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean for us as a digital marketers? What does it mean for our companies? And so on the one hand, the automation is good, right? It takes away the nitty-gritty, detailed manual work on keywords and CPCs that we used to spend hours and hours on in the past. But what does it mean also if everything is automated, if everyone's using the same machine learning platform? So, well, is it all great news in the end? Well, it's not if we want to stand out. If we want to be that different, if we want to have differentiators, in order for us to be better than our competitors or to position our products on the market. And so we need to think about how can we leverage AI, how can we leverage the new automated formats in an environment where everyone's treated equally. And ultimately, it's also important for us to understand how we can keep our jobs or give our jobs a more meaningful way and rethink our jobs in this environment. And so today, we want to take a look at PMax also from these angles and understand how can we leverage Performance Max in a way that we can stand out compared to anyone else in the market. How can we give it that competitive advantage that it's necessary to not just be average and to just not just leave everything the algorithm the way that the algorithm is also supposed to work, and how ultimately can we play a role in our companies. And we, as anticipated, are going to do it in a twofold ways. So we are going to first start with short-term differentiators. So we're going to give you a number of best practices, tips and tricks that you can take and go back to your accounts, implement, see what works for your accounts, see what works best. And then in the second part, we are going to take a look at the long-term differentiators. So the ones that are more complex to implement, that might require some data pipelining, that also require a shift in strategy. And those ones are the ones that we would really like to give to you today as something that you go back to your companies and to your agencies and take with you and maybe think differently about Performance Max, but also any other type of campaigns and automations that we'll have in the future. So we are going to start with the short-term differentiators. And for that, I'll hand over to Rosaria.
Thank you very much, Luana, and hi again. So yeah, as announced, I will be covering some of the short-term hacks and tips or tricks, as you prefer to call them, that you can really now pretty much immediately go back home with and implement into your account. And hopefully this will already be a good starting point to improve performance of your campaigns. And then, we'll be covering a bit of, quite some long-term differentiators later on. But let's dive right in. When we started putting together the content of this presentation, what we wanted to understand first was where our clients were standing in terms of adoption of Performance Max. This is a benchmark showing the UK and DACH region adoption, or the most recent share of adoption. And UK, as it often is the case with new features, leading the way already with 84% adoption rate. The DACH area is lagging a bit behind at 66%. And this is pretty much where we stand right now. With most of our clients, we have worked together to already fully roll out Performance Max in their accounts, or at least integrating it into the current strategy. There are some challenges that we've encountered along the way, and the two most common ones that we could observe were data related and creative related. On the data side, on reporting side, in most cases what we've noticed is that clients find it difficult to let go the granularity of visibility that we were used to have with other campaign types. Obviously everybody wants to know how a brand or a category specifically is performing, or against which keywords our ads are showing. So with formats like PMax, some of this visibility will need to let it go. But if we think about the overall performance uplift that we can obtain, then this might still be worth it. But anyhow, later on, we're going to give you some tips on how you can overcome some of these challenges. And the second most common is about creatives. And here, in most cases, the challenges are around generating or producing enough creatives to power these formats. Sometimes it's also a struggle of getting the production prioritized internally. And here as well, we're going to give you some tips later on. These were the two most common challenges we encountered so far. But actually here, I also wanted to take a second to ask you if these are also challenges that you encountered, if you're facing any other challenge that hopefully we will be covering in this presentation today. Anyone? You can also nod if these two are the challenges that you are encountering. Yeah, I see a few nods indeed. Okay, then I'm happy because we're gonna indeed give you some useful tips. And before deep diving into this section, I also want to emphasize how important it is for us to really jump onto this opportunity now. Performance Max is here to stay. We've lived this already with smart bidding a few years ago, and then smart shopping again. So it's really here to stay. We need to take the chance to test it now, to learn now how to use it to our advantage. And we really need to get familiar and comfortable with automation, with machine learning, because this is going to be at the core of any new technology. So it's really important that we jump onto this opportunity right now, and we feed these campaign types with the right assets and the right data, as we will see in a bit. So, first, relatively basic but super important best practice is to adopt conversion best practices to recapture lost data points. So this is obviously not only relevant to Performance Max, but it is crucial, especially in the world of AI, and that's why we decided to start from here. What we have observed is an average uplift in conversion counted of roughly 20% by implementing features like consent mode, enhanced conversion, and server-side tracking. Especially enhanced conversion, this is something that internally has worked very well. We've seen indeed a range of 15 to 20% uplift in counted conversions. This is actually an example of one of our clients, what you're seeing now on the slide. But server-side tracking, most importantly, is really the future. You want to take control of the conversion data. You need to stop depending or relying on third-party trackers, which are becoming more and more obsolete with all these privacy measures that we're hearing a lot about, right? Devices, browsers, they will be blocking any sort of cookies moving forward. So we have observed really positive results from implementation of server-side tracking, and ultimately it will ensure you don't lose a big share of conversions. It will basically ensure that you're still capable of tracking some potentially lost conversions otherwise. So this is the first very basic but super, super important best practice that we absolutely recommend you to follow. The second one is about structures. And here the story is very simple. Indeed, keep it simple is our recommendation. And we have tested this extensively. And what we've learned is that smaller campaign fleets with larger data aggregation work better. They can bring a potential uplift, at least for what we've observed internally, of up to 70% additional volume at similar level of efficiency under the same ROAS target. So our recommendation is really only segment campaigns when you actually have a need of doing so. For example, if you need separate targets. And we're going to look into that in a second. What we very often see when, for example, we analyze accounts for prospects is these very large campaign setups that are very, very granular and are very likely a hangover of some reporting desire. Today, with Performance Max, we're not able to aggregate a campaign, together. We don't have portfolio bidding, for example. So really keep the segmentation to a minimum and leverage the data aggregation that is so beneficial for the algorithm. And the same applies actually to assets. So if you don't have assets, don't overcomplicate your structure. Even if you can still customize the text stats, for example, unless your text stats share is really high, is it really worth it? Keep it simple. Really don't overcomplicate your structure unnecessarily, because this is what will work best with your Performance Max campaigns. However, there is a couple of exceptions to this rule. The first one is about your branded queries. What we know for sure, right, is that Google algorithm shouldn't treat your brand and non-brand queries the same. This often leads to over-indexing of your branded queries and overbidding on these queries. So you really want to control the spend on your brand activity to better manage and measure your brand investment. And definitely, you need different targets for brand and non-brand, right? We said just now that keep the segmentation to a very minimum unless you have the need of a segmentation. And in this case, you definitely want to segment, right? This does make a good exception because you want to assign a different goal to your brand activity. In this example, we were able to halve the CPCs on branded queries for one of our clients by simply segmenting out brand into a dedicated standard shopping campaign. The way you can do this is currently either on the account level with negative lists. That's obviously coming with some drawbacks because then all campaigns in the same account will basically be impacted by this. Or you can have Google reps to support you and add negative lists to your account. Actually here, one recommendation, you don't necessarily need a Google rep, you can still get it done by the regular Google support. And just a tip here, you could also ask the Google rep or support to add a list to your Performance Max campaigns, and then you can independently edit that list. So you won't have to go and reach back to your Google rep every time you need to add one or two new keywords. So that's definitely a first very valid exception to the keep it simple rule. And the second one is about the age of your products. What we know is that very often 90% of your product inventory is basically ignored, right? And the vast majority of your traffic is coming from a very small share of your inventory. And on top of that, what we've also observed is that Google algorithms tend to prefer products it has had plenty of time to observe. And this is what you see on the slide. The volume of traffic is increasing the farther the time goes by. So why this is a problem? Because if you have new products added to your inventory or products that generally have low or no traffic, it will take a long time for this to ramp up. And it's a problem because your newest products might be the ones with the higher margins or might be the most up-to-date seasonal offer that you have. So you really want the Google algorithm to give exposure to this. So you need still probably to push out some explorative campaign types. And here we recommend indeed zombie campaigns or product incubators where you can push these products, again, either new products or products that historically haven't had much traffic, so that you can basically help them gaining the exposure they need. And you can then push traffic and visibility to products that might matter a lot strategically to your business. Once they hit a certain threshold, they will be automatically then pushed back into the main campaign, and they will, in the meantime, have had a chance to actually gain some traffic. So these are definitely two super valid exceptions to the rule, and something we've tested a lot, and it's really working well. For example, for one of our clients, we were able to generate additional 4.5K conversions in a month just by simply implementing a zombie campaign. And it performed very well, similar cost per order as other campaign types, so definitely recommended. My next tip is about product fit. This might be a bit more relevant for e-commerce type of businesses. So if anybody in the audience is working in e-commerce, maybe you want to take a note here. This might not be the most sexy piece of advice, but it's actually super important because, as you can see from this slide, which is a cost distribution report from one of our clients, so it's actual data, shopping, at least in the e-commerce industry, is making up the vast majority of your investment. In this example here, the client is not running any display or a discovery activity. They do have a bit of a spotty search coverage, so that's why the share of search here is particularly high in some cases. But anyhow, what you see very clearly is that the investment in shopping is still making up the majority of the share. So that means you want to ensure your product feed is up to scratch. You want to make sure you optimize it for the basics, like product titles and product descriptions, but also use additional attributes like product highlights or short titles, for example. So definitely start from the basics, get the basics right, and then also consider that now there is also additional attributes in the feed that are specific to the display placement. One example is here, the display ads title. This is actually not so new. It's been out since the smart shopping time, so it's a few years already, but we notice that it's very often neglected. And it's now super important when you have a campaign like Performance Max, which is automatically covering displacements. So definitely use display ads title. This is going to improve your dynamic remarketing quality, specifically dynamic remarketing. However, keep in mind that as in dynamic remarketing campaigns, the title will appear under a product which appears alongside other of your products. So you want to keep into consideration things like avoiding repeating your brand name too often, right? Rather focus on what makes your product unique instead. Here you have 150 characters available. However, we strongly recommend using less so that you also avoid truncated titles. There's also a short title available. This actually can appear all over the place. So display, YouTube, Discovery, Gmail, and that's also something that we absolutely recommend adopting. Same characteristics, so 150 characters. However, really we recommend going with half of them. But the next one is actually one of my favorite, and this is more recent. It's called Lifestyle Image Link, and this was indeed rolled out by Google to support formats that are powered by the product feed, like indeed, obviously, Performance Max. This is super cool because it allows you to add an additional link to a lifestyle type of image, which is not what you would normally see on a shopping result page, right? Obviously, the shopping attributes were not really designed to serve ads on the display network. So this is Google's effort to give us something that we can use to generate, for example, brand awareness. We know for a fact that product images, they work very well in the lower stages of the funnel, but lifestyle images are much more powerful in brand awareness campaigns. And in this way, you have a very nice, easy way to connect to your audience by giving them a snapshot of basically what their life could be if they had your product. So it's super nice. We recommend using it. And thanks Google also for rolling this out. Next tip is about creatives. And I want to take just 1 second to ask a question. So now, who in the audience has a song from 2012 stuck in their head? You can just raise your hands. I'll get an idea. A few. Okay. Yeah, same for me. I have it stuck in my head since I was making the slide, basically. So I'm apologizing because we're not going to watch the video. But any of you remember like what the song was about? Or you just remember maybe the song itself and some of the dance moves, right? Yeah. So the point here indeed is that people remember what they see. And they less easily remember what they read. Statistically, 68% of people remember what they see, and only 6% remember what they read. So what I want to say here is that you don't want to neglect creatives. You don't want to neglect video. This is another example of another client of ours, similar view, so this cost distribution. However, what you see here that is interesting is that the video share is larger. Why? Because the client is using dedicated video assets. In the example before, the campaign, the Performance Max campaign, didn't have a dedicated or bespoke video asset. In this case, the client is using it, and this is directly and immediately affecting the share of video where the budget is invested in the Performance Max campaign. So this directly influences the number of impressions that you can get from YouTube. And we also recommend leveraging the many available AI-powered tools out there that will give you the chance to add a lot of variety to your asset portfolio and test one against the other. I know for sure that there is someone from Google in the audience, so I'm going to apologize for what I'm going to say now. But you know that the Google algorithm is able to create a video automatically, which is very cool. There's just one problem, that it does know very little about your brand, right? So you really want to make sure that the video your users are watching feels like your brand. And actually, again, thanking Google for this, there is a beta, which is called Labs, that you can use to generate your own video by using your own image assets. And then you can choose the music background, you can add call to actions, you can customize it a bit, but don't let Google automatically generate your videos. And as I said, you can also leverage a lot of very nice, some of them are even free really, tools out there that can help you to generate or produce more assets. And the cool thing is that AI can also support generating more assets at scale. And this is really crucial. You want to use all the available spaces that Performance Max is giving you. You want to drive iterative creative testing to understand what works best for your audience. This is obviously now a random example. Yeah, what we see here is that we have an individual lifestyle image and a group lifestyle image. One works very well for an adult type of audience. The other one is working better for a teen group. Now, this is an example, but what we want to say is test a lot, test, learn, repeat. It's really important that you understand what works best for your audience. One image is not going to work forever. You need to understand what your target audience is reacting better to. So definitely test with different looks, frame, non-framed, different color themes. This is super important. And I'm going to briefly mention also about reporting. This is last but definitely not least, because it is one of the biggest challenges, right, that we mentioned at the beginning. Question now. This is now a snapshot of a screenshot, a snapshot of a cost distribution report that I've shown at the beginning of the section. Any of you has an idea how this was put together? Very well, exactly. Scripts. So luckily, there is some very smart PPC guys out there that developed and published scripts that are actually super useful. They help us overcoming some of the reporting limitations that we have right now with Performance Max in the UI. Hopefully this is not going to last forever. I'm sure we will have more capabilities in the future, but for now and until then, there are some very, very nice scripts that you can use. This is one of our favorite, published by agency Savvy, which basically allows you to pool performance data for your Performance Max campaigns down to the asset group level, as you can see in the next slide. In this case, the visualization was done by us in Looker Studio. Obviously, you can use the tool that you prefer. The original outcome is a Google spreadsheet, but it's super useful. For us, it helped us tremendously in answering some of our clients' questions that otherwise we wouldn't have been easily able to reply. So absolutely one of our favorite scripts. Thanks again for creating it and publishing it. Absolutely recommended to use. If you have any questions on this, feel free to reach out to us after the session. And I hope you learned something interesting, something that you can implement quickly today, tomorrow. So thanks a lot for your patience so far. I'm going to hand it back to Luana now. So thank you.
Thank you, Rosaria. So now we've talked about the short-term differentiators, so some best practices, tips, tricks that, as Rosaria mentioned, you can take back to your accounts, implement, see what works well for your accounts. Now we want to take a look at the more long-term differentiators, so the ones that will require some maybe again, some data pipelining, some tech behind, and also thinking about PMax in a wider strategy to realign it with your business objectives. And to do so, we want to take a look, we take a step back again and take a look at what is essentially the key problems that we're facing with PMax, but also with any other automated campaign type, any other automations that we have in the Google ecosystem. If we recall the quote at the beginning of the slides of our deck, where Google said, "Hey, you need to optimize for the right metrics. You really need a key differentiators if everyone's using the same machine learning platform." And if we take a step back and think of that, we can also figure out what are the key problems right now. And the key problems are that if everyone's using the same machine learning algorithms, if everyone's just looking at revenue, which is what the algorithms usually see, then we end up having three main problems. The first is that you're going to spend the majority of your marketing dollars on deeply loyal customers, so customers that know your business very well, that are maybe have already been to your website or have already purchased several times on your website. And so it's the customers that you actually don't want to spend your investment, your budgets on. And also according to Google, 90% of your budget should go into prospecting. But in reality, the opposite here happens. And at the same time, because you're targeting very, very often a large portion of your existing customers, there's also little care for the ones that truly matter to your business on the longer run. So new customers, the ones that are going to fuel your business growth over the years. And why this happens? This happens because we feed the algorithm, we feed PMax, we feed any other campaign, automated campaign types with the wrong data. And so if we take a look at PMax itself, so if we take a look at the composition of PMax, you're going to have a very, very large portion of branded queries, both in PLA and in text ads, that have a very strong signal to the AIs, because there is a lot of cookies availability of those type of customers. Google knows the behavior of those customers is going. Google knows that those customers have a higher conversion probability, and so it's going to go after those type of customers. But at the same time, those are the ones who have a very, very little incremental value to your business. So the ones that you don't want to spend budget on, but that you ultimately, in the construct and in the setup of PMax, you're going to spend your budget on. Then you also have this middle portion where you also have existing customers in PLA, not branded queries. They're still quite important. They have a medium incremental value to your business. But the very important piece here is that the ones that are really important, the ones that truly matter, the new customers, are undervalued and underrepresented in how PMax works, and it's a self-reinforcing cycle to focus really on the wrong numbers here. And this happens because PMax essentially looks at nominal revenue, and this is what it sees. And it's also supposed to see it if it's the only metric that we are feeding it with. And so if we now think back once again of the quote that we heard at the beginning, so how to fix that? Well, you need to feed the right data into the AI. And how do we do that? We do that by activating first-party data in your PMax campaigns. So let's take a very simple example. Let's imagine you are a business that sells office essentials like printers, ink, paper, headsets, etc. If you are only optimizing your campaigns by feeding into the algorithm revenue, then this is what the algorithm sees. It's revenue is revenue, right? So, but your products have a lot of differentiation in terms of margins. So if you sell a printer, you might have higher margins versus a headset. Also, you might have products that have a higher return rate versus products that have a lower return rate. So printers, for example, might have a lower return rate because the consumers tend to do a lot of research beforehand, and then they end up with one model, then buy it, and maybe stay with that model. So the probability of returning it is not very high, unless it's broken. While a headset is a wearable, might not fit, so you might have a higher return rate on that type of product. Also, if we think about what is the value that a new customer that buys a printer or buys a headset is going to bring to your business on the longer run, you have a huge difference in there, because someone who buys a printer might come back 5 times during the year and buy, for example, ink sets or print paper. So you're going to have a customer who has been acquired over a printer who is going to come back several times in their life cycle and perform follow-up purchases. While someone who buys a headset might only buy a headset and not come back again throughout the year. And so the algorithm PMax, the AI behind it, doesn't know it. So, and if you want to make it know it, you need to make those metrics, those values, transparent to the algorithm. And so if you want to make sure that PMax understands that printer is more valuable than a headset in terms of margins, then you need to make those margins transparent to the algorithm. If you want to make sure that PMax values low returns versus high returns, you need to ingest into the system returns predictions. And if you want to make sure that it also understands the different value and the quality of new customers that you acquire, and how much they will bring in terms of repeated purchases over the course of their lifetime, then you need to ingest CLV values into the system. And so today we are going to take a look now in the second part how to do it. But before we come to that, we want to make sure that we want to take you through smaller steps and also start with where do I start in the first place? So if I've been working with revenue so far, how do I make that happen? So the first thing to do is to think about a formula that really reflects your business values. So, and it's also what Google recommends as and calls value-based bidding, and it also allows us to go after it and to make it possible to ingest that data into the system, and we'll see how. But the very, very first thing that you'll need to do is to think about this formula. It can be as simple as you see on this slide. So you know your products, you know the gross revenue of those products, but you also know the margins of those products. You know the cost of goods sold for each of your products. And so you can take your gross revenue and detract the cost of goods sold. You also know your variable costs like shipping, packaging. You can also detract them from the gross revenue. And you'll also know the return rates or the returned product margins. We'll see in a short how to calculate them if you don't know how. And you would also know what's the business value that each single customer brings to your business on the longer run. And we'll also see how to calculate that if you're not familiar with that. But let us start with the margins. They're very, very straightforward. So we have talked about different products having different margins, and why that difference matters a lot is if you are a multi-brand retailer, or if you're a brand with a large variety of products, you might have also a large distributions of margins. So you have products that have very, very high margins and others that have low margins. And the wider this distribution, the more important and the more meaningful is this differentiation to the algorithm. And we've seen it with our clients. As soon as we started activating margins into the algorithm started going after the higher margin product. So it's very, very simple. You really need to make that differentiation visible to the algorithm, and you'll be able to steer it towards the type of products that you like to achieve by having your PMax campaign in place. Of course, if you are a single brand, or if you are a single product business that only sells one product, has one margin, this differentiation is less meaningful to you. But again, as soon as you have several types of products, as soon as you also run promotions, this is going to matter. Also, promotions are quite important because you're going to have seasonal differences in the margins, and it's something that you can also reflect in the margins and make it visible throughout the year by actualizing, updating your margins depending on the period of the year. We've talked about margins. We're going to take a look also now at returns. They're less obvious, less straightforward, but also equally important because it's effectively margins that you also want to detract. So if you spend your investment into products that are going to be returned, then you essentially need to detract also that type of margins from your effectively from your profit, because they're not bringing anything to your business if they get returned. So let's take a look shortly on how you can calculate returns. The most there are different ways, but let's stay as first what's actually the challenge with returns. There are 3 types of challenges attached to it. The first is that is data scarcity. So not all your products have high volume, and not all your products are easily recognizable in terms of returns. So let's take this example here. Let's imagine you are a shoe retailer and you sell different type of shoes. Then you have a moccasino that you have sold 1,000 times, and then it gets returns 344 times. Quite easy. You have an easy calculated return rate of 34.4. It sounds very horrible, but it's actually really average, and even more than that. And so you have a very valid return rate for this product. Then let's imagine you launch a new sneaker. This sneaker has a very, very low sell rate yet because it's new. It doesn't have a high sell volume. It got bought only twice, and it got returned twice. And then you would have, if you only take this differentiation, you would have a calculated return rate of 100%. So is this a valid return rate? No, it's not, of course, just because you don't have the statistical significance in order to say that this is a valid return rate. The volume is very low. Is it an option to just remove it because of this from the feed and not advertise on that product? It's also not an option. And so we're going to take a look at how you can do it. But first, last 2 problems with returns. We talked about data scarcity. The second problem is time delay. Usually returns trickle in within 30 days, 28 days, depending on your return policies. But actually, you need that data immediately to feed it into the AI, into the algorithm. And so we are going to take a look at how you can still work with that. And also, you have a seasonality problem again, very similarly to margins. You're going to have different return rates depending on the period of the year. So we know, for example, that during Black Friday, people tend to buy several sizes of the same item and then return the majority of them and keep only one. So you're going to have a different return rate in certain periods of the year versus the majority of the year. And so what you can do to calculate returns in the first place is aggregation. So if you don't have enough volume on slow sellers or new products, the first thing, and very, very simple thing that you can do, is to aggregate products, different models, to a category level. So you can take all of the returns of your shoes and put them together and have a category average. Same applies to tops, bottoms, and any other type of product. You can get also more sophisticated with your approach by starting being more granular with the aggregation. So you can start taking a look at the model. If you don't have enough data, then maybe you can go with category and brand. So aggregate at a still little bit more granular level than only going to categories. So you can choose whatever variables you'd like to, and you get broader and broader with your aggregation until you reach the main category, and you have so you stop where you have the statistical significance for your products. The most sophisticated way is, of course, using machine learning algorithms, where you can feed the machine learning models with a lot of variables, and like going beyond brand and category, you can also fit them with sizes. For example, you know that fringe sizes are more likely to be returned more, and basket compositions, etc. And the models are going then to anticipate what the return rate of a certain bought product would be. There are a lot of machine learning models out there that can be used to anticipate and to forecast expected return rates for your products. And this is what we essentially would, of course, recommend, because it's the most sophisticated way. It doesn't look at only the past, but tries to predict also the future. So we've talked about margins, we've talked about returns. We also want to take a look at the last point. So the importance of the customers that you're going to acquire with your Performance Max campaigns, and the differentiation and why it is important. So if we go back to the analogy of the printer, of the business essentials retailer, and then we think about only the customer type. So we've already said a customer like Sally, who buys a printer and is going to come back several times throughout the year, might have a higher customer lifetime value than someone who just comes, buys a headset, and doesn't perform any follow-up purchases anymore throughout the year. So why even bother actually PMax to go after new customer lifetime value? First of all, because we want to make it work a little bit harder here, not really go after revenue, but really as we said, make it visible, realigning your business values with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis in your accounts, and making sure that you can steer it in the right direction. So the more you make visible to the algorithm, the better you will be able to steer it towards the high-margin products, low returns, and the types of customers that really, really matter to your business. And you also want to go, of course, after new customers, because they're important. They're the ones that help you grow the business. But you also want to go for the ones, like in this example, that are really valuable to your business, and not the ones that are only coming once and not back again. Let's take a look very shortly at the out-of-the-box new customer features that PMax provides already. And then we are going to take a look on how to ingest first-party customer data. There are some inbuilt features in PMax. The first one is the new customer value mode. So here you can already tell the campaign with a campaign setting that it should go for should bid higher for new customers versus existing customers by simply attaching a value to the new customer. So if you know that a new customer is worth of 50 euros to your business over the course of 1 year, then you can attach that value, and this way you are giving a signal to the algorithm to go and chase new customers versus existing customers. Then you also have the new customer only mode, where you can essentially tell the algorithm, hey, go only after new customers. And it's a campaign setting that's already built in PMax. As per our experience, we know that the targeting per se doesn't really work really, really well. and that's very natural because it's based on cookies recognition. And Google only has a limited view on the active cookies of converted users. It means not every user who has converted in the past will log in with the same active cookie session. And so the chances are high that some of your existing customers are going to land into the new customer bucket. So take it with a pinch of salt. It's there. It's a feature, but you might end up having a certain share of existing customers in your new customers share. There is a very, very promising beta that Google is rolling out. We haven't tested it yet, but it will be our next test, and it's the new customer high value optimization feature. It's sort of a combination of the two that we've seen. So it has a stronger focus on the high value customers. So you can provide it with your own segmentation of customers where are predicted to have a long or a higher lifetime value for your business. So you still need to do the predictions yourself. You can segment your customers based on the expected new customer values, and then you can feed it into the system. And essentially, with this beta, you can already tell PMax to go after the ones who have an expected higher lifetime value. But at the same time, the beta will still optimize in general for new customers. So it's going to differentiate and take a higher lift or a higher value on the ones that are expected to have a higher new customer value over time. If you take that beta, so that feature, you can also overlay it with the first party data ingestion that we're going to see immediately. And then you can also essentially pair it with conversion value rules that gives you another lever, another possibility to adjust, for example, restricting, retargeting on existing engaged visitors, for example, or existing customers. So you can use the inbuilt Google NCA high value optimization feature paired with first-party data ingestion, paired with conversion value rules, and this way you're going to have a very powerful way to give the algorithm very strong signals towards the customers that you want to acquire with your PMax campaign. Super short about the NCA recognition. We recommend to use customer match lists in order to feed the data into the NCA mode. There is also an auto detection that relies on existing customers in a look-back window. It's not very precise. Your customer match lists are the ones that it's your business, you know your existing customers, so you can segment them also you can take an RFM segmentation. So these are really the ones that you should take back to the UI, and the ones that you should feed into the UI. And there's of course also a recognition with a real-time tag. If you use the new customer parameter, which would recognize if a customer is an existing customer or a new customer in real time, and this is possible through the tag. One very last bit about, we haven't talked about how to calculate actually customer lifetime value for value-based bidding. So we are going to take a look at that, and then how to ingest it into the system. So the way that you can do it is you know your customers, you have your CRM data. So essentially you can take a look at your customers from their first purchase and follow them throughout the year with their follow-up purchases. So let's take an example. You start taking a look at January 2021. And you take a look at all first purchases in that month, and then you're going to follow up those customers throughout the entire year until December 2021. Then you start with February 2021, you take a look at the first purchases and you follow up those customers throughout the year until January 2022, and so forth. So, and you do that, you repeat that for the entire year. This way, you would have you would be able to build cohorts of customers and understand really how your business works, understand how often customers come back throughout the year. You can be a little bit more sophisticated with that, and you could also take a look at the first basket, so at the first purchase, and the type of product that you're looking that was purchased first, and how often then a customer comes back. So if we think back of the printer example, you could see if someone who buys a printer comes back several times versus someone who buys a headset, doesn't come back, or maybe comes back once. And so you will be able to derive different customer lifetime values for your clients' cohorts. And the most sophisticated way to do so is, of course, again, using machine learning models that have a very, very surprising accuracy, which you can feed with your CRM data, and they're going to anticipate, to forecast the customer lifetime value of your customers. There are a lot of different provider out there. We're going to take a look at the next slides. With those models, you're essentially able to feed in a lot of information, like more variables like price, promotions, categories, payment method, location, etc., etc. And the models are going to learn from your data and forecast the lifetime value every time that an unknown user comes to your website and performs a purchase. Again, there are a lot of different ways on how you could do that. Either you might have already your data science team in-house. If you don't have one, there are also a lot of providers out there. Crealytics, we are also one, but there are many out there like Retina, CrossEngage, RetentionX, and there are, of course, also academic open source libraries for predicting models, so like the clvtools.com, which is a university research type one. We're approaching the end, and we're going to get a little bit more tangible on how to ingest the data, but super shortly, we also wanted to show you that this works. So we have, these are real results from clients of ours where we have activated first-party data in PMax, and where we have been seeing growing the CLV gross profit of those clients, and also the margins shifting up to 33% in this client's case, but we have also seen the quality of acquired customers improve in a short period of time. I believe in this case it was just 3 months' time, where we've seen also high-value customers, so the sellies, going up by 23%, while the low value ones, so the ones that only comes one, decrease by 11%. So just making sure that we don't stay only with the theory, but we also give you some tangible numbers here from our own experience with first-party activation in PMax. Rosaria is going to take you in 2 to 3 slides on how to activate first-party data now in your accounts in PMax.
And hi again. So I'm going to be super brief, I promise. But if you were wondering how, actually, you can ingest value-based bidding into the Google algorithm. You can do this in 2/3 ways. There is an offline conversion import option. This is simply using Google click IDs to insert conversion in the Google system. And the benefit is that it allows custom attribution models. However, the disadvantage is that it disables most real-time tag features. I'm talking about consent mode, enhanced conversions, for example. The best practice is, which is what we're using at Crealytics, and we're going to show an actual example in the next slide, is conversion adjustment. This uses a combination of a Google tag, so the Google conversion tag that sends estimated conversion value in real time, which are then restated at a later stage. The benefits here are that it leverages real-time tag features, so it works perfectly with features like enhanced conversions, for example. The one tip that we want to give you here is that you should really avoid up-weighting or down-weighting the value too much, because that could confuse the bidder. And there is this very promising beta, which is called deferred online values, which pretty much works the same as offline conversion adjustment, so the middle one. The difference and the benefit here is that it uses a placeholder in real time for the conversion value, so it sets the value to 0, and then it gets restated at a later stage. The difference is that in this case, the algorithm gets a signal to only model and train to the restated values. So you basically don't run the risk of confusing the bidder, because it will only train its model to the restated values that you're going to add at a later stage. How you do it, and this is how we do it at Crealytics, is a twofold process. You have a real-time phase where a real-time event handler is sending information directly to a Google Ads conversion event, let's say a purchase conversion action. So it adds to the basket value estimated margins, a fixed customer lifetime value, which usually you calculate per market, for example, and average return rates for the specific category. And in this example, let's say the estimated value in real time is $150. Then 24 hours later, which is, by the way, the earliest you can restate the value. You can restate up to 7 days later, however, obviously, the earlier the better. So we do it the earlier. 24 hours later, we restate this value by basically making this estimation more accurate. We receive first-party data from our clients, and we use this data to calculate actual margin. So we're going to basically refine this estimated value with, indeed, actual margins, predicted customer lifetime value, and with the average, the return rate, to get to a more accurate value. In this example, $175. So this is how we're currently doing it at Crealytics. This is also basically the best practice to do this, to implement this process without losing also the opportunity to leverage features like enhanced conversion, as an example. If you want to know a bit more of the technical details, I'm obviously not going to do it now, but more than happy to connect after the masterclass, and I'm happy to share more insights with you. Yep. For now, I will hand it back to Luana.
Yep. Thank you, Rosaria. One last bit, how do you upload the data actually on the next day? There are two ways. One is an offline conversion adjustment upload, so it's a file, effectively, that you can import into the Google UI. And the other way, this is how we do it, is via an API connector to the UI. So you have both possibilities, either Google Sheet, effectively an import, or an API. This is how you really ingest the data. Very, very last bit, and then we come to the conclusion of our presentation. How do you make sure that what you're doing is really yielding an impact? So in the first place, you can, of course, run incrementality tests on PMax. So you, very, very simply, with a geo-split, you can activate PMax in certain regions versus having a holdout test and in other regions or cities, for example, not activating PMax. And then you can also, if you are also going to supercharge PMax with your first-party data, then you can do a pre-after test and see how the effect of activating first-party data supercharges your PMax campaigns. So if we wrap it up and take it back to the wider context, the wider why we are doing this. I'm going to show you one last slide here. This is actually a real example from one of the performance marketing opportunity audits that we do with some of our with some of our clients, but we also do on a regular basis together with private equities and consulting firms like McKinsey, with many retailers out there. We have taken a look at hundreds of millions of marketing dollars, and what we have seen always is that if you have a status quo where you're only looking at revenue, there's only so much that you're leaving on the table. If you start taking a look at how you are effectively spending your marketing dollars in your PMax campaigns, but also thinking it from a wider perspective, your paid media channels in general. So you always see that if you start revealing the real value that is intrinsic to your business, like start ingesting margins, returns, expected customer lifetime value for new customers, then you're going to have an uplift in terms of through the data activation. And so this is a strategic way that you can think also about your paid media approach. There's also the operational opportunities out there. So the standard campaign optimizations that you can take, not only on PMax, but in general on your performance marketing campaigns of any channel that you're looking at. And they are also going to add on top of that. It's constant work though. And then there's also a part that we haven't talked about today, but it's also the budget allocation is thinking about through incrementality testings, for example, where do I actually need to put my marketing dollars? What are the channels that are truly incremental to my business? And so what we have seen is that the combination of both, so the strategic thinking about data activation and budget reallocation and the operational gains through operational improvements is what works best. And there's really a lot a lot of potential that you can unlock, that retailers out there can unlock if they start thinking in those spheres, in those perspectives. And so one very last bit, coming to the end of our presentation, we would like you to think about PMax not only as a new campaign type that you need to optimize and take back to your accounts, but really think it from a perspective of it's a campaign type that it's fully automated. In the wider scheme of automation, AI is there to stay. You don't need to fight against it. You don't need to fix the algorithms. You just need to give it the right data. And it really needs you to give it the right data. So we know that chess computers beats human in chess. That's a fact. But we also know that humans with chess computers beat chess computers. And so what our key message here is the AI needs you. It needs you to guide it. It needs you to steer it towards the right metrics. And ultimately, you also need it, because this is what is going to make a difference in your for your business. It allows you to realign your business objectives with your day-to-day operations ultimately. And so we would really like to give you as very last thought of the day, think about PMax on those terms, go back, implement your the best practices and the tips that you've heard, but also go back to your business and think about PMax in this wider scheme. Thank you very much. And now I think if someone has or anyone has questions, we are here.
Sorry, I have one question. I'm testing this format since it's in the beta version, so a long time. And we had really good times at the beginning, and at the moment, yeah, well, it's not that good anymore. And what we tried now is we just implemented the feed. It's a retail or e-commerce,
Feed.
course. Yeah.
Yep.
So, and nothing else. No creatives, no text ads, nothing. What do you think about that? We just did it now, so there are not
Yep.
that many
Yep.
results. So what
Yep.
do you think about that?
Yep.
Maybe I can also quickly answer this one. Nothing against this, really. We've tested it as well. It also really depends on the creative assets that you have available. If you don't have any and you still want to test the format, that is a good way of testing it. It basically will still pull the assets from the product feed. Obviously, they might not be optimized, right, to show ads on the display placements. But I've given you a couple of tips earlier that you can use, definitely. So yeah, no, nothing against it. I think the major benefit of Performance Max is obviously that it allows you to cover a full wide range of inventory with a relatively easy to manage campaign. But depending also on how your business is performing on certain channels like display or discovery, and also depending on which type of goals you have, what targets you have, what budget you have, you might need to focus on a product feed specific type of campaign. So really no, nothing against it. We've tested it, it works fine. But definitely, if you get the chance, try to leverage the wider scope. But for us, it's also worked well.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen it also in the in one of the slides before. Essentially, if you don't give it any creatives, it is going to be, to a vast majority, shopping. So nothing more than that. So you are effectively taking a format that is capable of much, much more and reducing it to a shopping, to just accessing the shopping inventory. So our recommendation in general is really to try out, if you have creatives, really the creative aspect, because it allows you really to access inventory or Google inventory that is out there, and that is also an easy way for you to try out new formats without going back to display or going back to YouTube, etc. Maybe it could be the first baby steps if you're not super familiar with those type of, or say if there's not a lot of dedicated marketing budgets also for those type of channels, then it's a way to see, maybe if I have a video, YouTube works to a certain extent, or if I have good creatives and a lot of creatives, maybe display does work. Again, as Rosaria mentioned, both are possible, advantages and disadvantages on both sides.
I mean, in the end, the share of non-shopping stays quite limited if you give it high targets, right? So it is also an indirect, I think, consequence that you anyhow would get to, right? To basically invest majority of your marketing budget in shopping if you anyhow are limiting the campaign with very high targets. So I think it really now depends on availability of assets in the first place, of course, because otherwise there is not even need, right, to consider that as an option, and definitely what type of goal you need to achieve and what targets you have. But yeah, I think you've got a couple of things that you can try in the meantime, and then if you get the chance, definitely test with more creatives. Any more questions?
I think we need.
Yes? I need to follow though, because otherwise we don't hear.
Hi, thank you so much. The majority of my clients don't have product feeds online. They're retail shopping destinations, but no feed. So I just wanted to ask, we tried Performance Max, we did discovery and display a lot. Is this still something that you would recommend to do PMax for someone who actually has no product feed, because a lot of product feed? And if yes, what kind of data can we feed into it to still get results for store visits or visits in the destination itself?
I needed to come because I couldn't hear.
So You definitely can still test it. I mean, Performance Max wasn't designed to only work with the product feed, right? But it was designed in a way that you could still use a product feed to feed it with attributes like titles or images or whatever you're using in your feed. But it's not exclusive to shopping. It's actually designed to be a format that covers a vast the vast majority of the placements out there. So definitely, yes, I would say I'd recommend at least testing it. Again, it goes in a similar direction to what we just said, right? It really depends also on what type of goals you want to achieve, and if you need to have more control over the campaigns, you might still want to test out a display type of campaign or a discovery type of campaign, but definitely recommend still testing it, even though you don't necessarily have a product feed. The second question,
If I'm not mistaken, the second question was about, well, what type of data should we give it then?
That's a very good question. I mean, you can still import offline data. Actually, we also showed before how you can do that. So you can make your effort a bit more in the direction of an omni-channel type of bidding. You said you do have an online presence, but it's not powered by a product feed. You still can import your store level data into Google and bid against it. That's actually something that now it's outside of Performance Max. It's something that we've tested at Crealytics a lot, right? Omnichannel bidding, integrating store information into the bidder and let it go against customers that not necessarily buy only or also online, but actually that convert in store. So that's definitely the type of information that you can include. Store level information is crucial as well for omni-channel activity. So that's something that I would totally recommend. And the way you can import it is actually very similar to what we were looking at before. I don't know if you do it already. I cannot see you anymore in the audience. Yeah, I can. So yeah, if you're not doing it, that's definitely something that I would recommend. Obviously, you need to partner up with some platforms that are capable of recording this type of information in store and share it back so that you can actually then upload it in the Google interface. But that's something that can be done. It's not the easiest integration. You definitely need a bit of a technical support, and actually you find a lot of support on the Google side in terms of how to implement this. But yeah, that's definitely something that I would recommend. And we've tested it. It actually works very nicely. As I said, not necessarily Performance Max specific now, but it works very nicely. And that's definitely something we're going to test more of as well. I hope we were able to answer your question. Nice, thank you. Any more questions? Yes. Sorry.
Yes, you were talking about excluding branding from Performance Max. So how would you then set up a branding campaign? Would you also use a Performance Max or do something else?
Okay, so you can.
I haven't heard the question.
So she was asking about the brand segmentation and how would you then set up a brand campaign if you're using a Performance Max campaign still? You can, you could. Our preferred way is to use a standard shopping campaign because then you have full control. You better control CPCs. That's how we achieved the results that we've shown before. So we segmented it out in a separate standard shopping campaign, and that gave us full control over the investment and the bidding and indexing of brand queries. But we've also tested a full PMax approach. So PMax still split by brand and non-brand, but both running on PMax. It doesn't reach the same let's say success levels as standard shopping, because that's where you have the majority of control. So my recommendation, or our recommendation, as long as it exists, use standard shopping for brand, but you can also test what works best for you. If you are not too concerned around PMax, that's something that we've tested ourselves. But long story short, recommendation, standard shopping for branded queries.
And also search, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, of course. Yeah. Search, let's say I'm giving it for granted in a way that you have a search campaign covering your brand queries, especially core or pure brand. That's obviously something that I'm giving for granted. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on your. It's always the question about the brand share in your campaigns, right? If you are a large brand and you have a large brand share, then it does make sense to segment it out, to split it out. If you are an unknown brand, and anyhow the share of your brand queries is very, very minimal in the entirety of your queries, then it's I would also say it's not worth the effort, and so pretty much depends on that. But yes, essentially also the Google's recommendation is also to still have text ads campaigns. So PMax is not replacing everything; it's complementing also the search campaign. So keep the lights on those, because they're also the ones who are going to give you the better control over your text queries, even though you're using TROAS or any sort of automated bidding there.
Yes, thanks a lot. And actually also a very quick tip as well. You can easily understand how much your Performance Max campaign is overbidding or over-indexing your branded queries by looking at the campaign insights, right? It's not a search query report per se, but it gives you a very good understanding of what type of queries are driving majority of our traffic and revenue. So in our cases, we very often see that when we do not segment, branded queries take like the first spot in the insights. If that's the case, you already have your answer. You want to segment it out for sure. Any other questions?
Hi, thank you. So you could use PMax, but you could also use the former campaign types. What would be the difference in results at the moment if you would just use shopping, search, YouTube, and display on separate campaigns?
In results, you said, right? Yes. Yeah. So it's a very good question. Not easy to answer. So definitely, I think, especially for smaller businesses and smaller teams, using a campaign types like Performance Max, it gives you back a lot of time to focus on other aspects that might be as important, right? Setting up and managing and optimizing several different campaign types requires time, requires resources. So the time saving, let's say, it's already a very valid point. But in general, I think there is one super important thing to keep in mind, which is data aggregation. We know for a fact that the algorithm works much better when there is a lot of data. So when you can aggregate this data into one campaign type, and you still have ways of controlling pretty much where your spend is going, how much, how big the share of video or display or shopping is, then you have a very good leverage in Performance Max. What we have observed, I would say, as an average, is an uplift in performance of at least 15% when testing Performance Max versus other campaign types. But also that depends a lot on your setup. It depends a lot on if you have shopping running on a good quality product feed. It depends a lot on if you have a good search coverage, for example. So that also depends on other factors. But it definitely comes with a benefit in terms of performance. So that's at least what we have observed so far in testing it. But again, similar answer to before. Now it also depends on how much control you want to still keep on certain assets, for example. I think it's just important to understand that realistically speaking, Performance Max is going to become very big, right? It's going to take over a lot of space in the advertising world. So it is important that you learn now how to use it and you learn now how to feed it in a way that works best for your business.
I would maybe add to answer your question about the different results. I think on the one hand it's also a budget question, in the sense that if you have enough budget to funnel into different types of campaigns and segments, say you have a dedicated search and YouTube and display budgets, etc., is of course you're going to need much more budget versus one PMax campaigns where you can have in some maybe less than the single budgets that you because you also need a certain threshold in order to be delivered on each of those segments every day. While if you have lesser budget available and you want still to try to access that inventory, then you can funnel it in a PMax campaign. We have seen it in one of the slides before that there is still a part where the share of display and YouTube is relatively low in PMax as of now. It is something that's still a little bit unsolved, and those segments are still underrepresented in the inventory that PMax is accessing right now. So maybe that answers also your question. Type of different results do we see? So if you have enough budget, dedicated assets for each of those formats, I would still go and try to have separate campaigns for display, for YouTube and search and shopping, and then you can still have PMax complementing the entire setup, because it might give you also a different access or different results. Also consider that you're giving PMax one target and it tries to serve all the inventory with that, while in the single segments you can have, of course, different types of optimization. And so in general, thinking it from this perspective, it's highly possible that you're going to achieve also better results, especially in the segments where that are still underrepresented in PMax.
And adding on top of that again, on top of budget, as we said earlier, it's also a lot about assets. I don't know if you remember one of the cost distribution that I showed during the presentation. You see, or we see the share of video or display increasing when you start adding in more assets. So the more display assets or the more video creatives you add, the bigger the share tends to be. And we've seen additional impressions from a low of 40% to even up to extra 200% from our testing, just by adding in more assets. So that's another thing, obviously, to take into account. There's a whole bunch of things that you need to consider, of course. But yeah. Yes, I guess we're almost done, right? Or done? There is maybe time for another question? I don't know. Yes? One last question.
One last question, then, yeah.
Then I would also ask a question, another one. We are also working with CSS partners, and I was always under the impression that it was better to not allow them to be on Google Shopping. But I was wondering if you thought it might be a good idea, because then you would be not just once, but several times on Google Shopping. But I always thought, okay, it would drive up our click prices. Or do you think it's a good idea to have several CSS partners with our products also on Google Shopping for Performance Max or Google Shopping in general?
Depends.
Depends, yes. Indeed, it depends. Easy, not easy again. I think in general, having a CSS partner is good because it definitely gives you additional visibility, right? It gives you more chances to appear with your products out there. And with the large competition, it's definitely valuable. I think we've tested also this a lot in the past. To be very honest, not with significant results that would go against or in favor of. It definitely brings its benefits in terms of additional coverage. But it's not something that I've seen being a major point of difference. So
Yes, as long as you activate CSS but don't have necessarily dedicated CSS campaigns for single CSSs, then it's still okay. So in the past we have tested having dedicated shopping campaign and CSS campaigns, and then as soon as we started aggregating them, we have seen much better results overnight. So it was really within 2 days we got much better results. And so again, in terms of uplift, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing to have it. So also, especially if you're going for visibility in the carousel, it's good to have several of your ads showing up there and taking more share of that carousel. Also, think about mobile. Shopping is designed for mobile, and you only have a small portion of your display visible. So the more you can fill those slots, the better visibility your brand will have. Again, if you don't have scattered campaigns for different CSSs, I think it's okay, it's fine. But yeah, again, we tested shopping campaign versus CSS campaign that did not work really well.
no, it didn't really give us any result that would be considered significant indeed. But yeah, if you only think about the additional visibility, that's already per se a good benefit. So yeah, definitely good for that at least.
Yeah. I think we need to to wrap up, but Rosaria and myself are here for the next hour, 1.5 hours. So if you have more questions, catch up off stage. We're still around, or let's connect on LinkedIn. Happy to answer more of your questions about PMax or data activation. And thank you very much again. Thank you.